Our first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Douglas Chapman. Douglas has been an SNP councillor for Rosyth and North Queensferry since 2007. Douglas was also the chair of Fife Council's Education Committee for 5 years. At present, Douglas is Cllr's spokesperson for education, children and young people. Prior to Douglas becoming an elected councillor, Douglas has worked for the TSB Scotland, the Glen Eagles Hotel, Fife Enterprise, and he was Bruce Crawford, MSP in the Scottish Parliament. Douglas now lives in Dunfermline with his wife Eileen and their 2 children, and has been a lifelong supporter of Scotland becoming an independent nation.
Tonight is at everybody who's going to speak tonight, I'm sure they're going to say how important this vote is in the 18th of September. And it's important for one big reason as well, is that there's no going back. Once we vote yes in September, there's no backward step that we can take to go back within the UK, and that's quite important, because if you look at all the countries that have gained independence from the UK and other countries, you'll find that not one of them has ever asked to go back and be ruled again by another jurisdiction. So that's a really important thing to start off with, that we're making a huge decision in September. It's got to be the right decision, will be the right decision for Scotland, I'm sure. The three or four things I want to talk about tonight, I know we've got 2 other excellent speakers here for you, but the three or four things I want to talk about is how, with independence, we can create a fairer and much more responsive society, how we can have a much more democratic type of society, how we can grow our economy and make it sustainable, and finally, how we can have a much more secure society where we all hear and we all know that we live in a very unstable world, but Scotland can play a very important part in making sure that we can bring peace across the world and make sure that we can play our part as international partners in making sure that Scotland can take its rightful place in all the world authorities and make sure we've got that level of influence. I'll start with being closer to the people. You know, there's been a lot of talk about this debate that people want to have between Alex Salmond and David Cameron, and I've come to the conclusion that the reason that Cameron does not want such a debate is because he doesn't know about Scotland. He doesn't understand Scotland, and maybe I'm sure he maybe cares about Scotland, but it certainly doesn't come across in the way that the policies are delivered here north of the border. So when you imagine these people sitting round a cabinet table, a cabinet that's filled with millionaires, a cabinet that's filled with ex-public schoolboys, then you think, are they actually representing our views to the best level that they can? Are they taking account of the views of Scotland and putting us at the forefront of their thoughts? There are a couple of things that have come up recently that suggest to me that that is not the case. If you look at the issue of high-speed rail, a huge investment, billions and billions of pounds, on a high-speed rail link between London and Birmingham. The cost of that is going to be equivalent to how much we spend on everything in Scotland in 1 year. And I'm sure that when the discussions were taking place around that cabinet table, I doubt very much if the impact of that decision on Scotland was ever in anyone's mind. And similarly, we've had the issue of the bedroom tax, a tax or a policy that was introduced to solve a problem, not here, but to solve a problem in London in the south east. And again, sitting around the cabinet table, going through the Prime Minister's mind, the millionaire's mind, the ex-public schoolboy's mind, is that what's going through their mind is, how does this affect Scotland? And the answer would be, well, it wouldn't even be on the agenda. And what we need in Scotland is a government that is responsive to what our requirements are, and indeed takes account of our nation and how we can improve our nation in every aspect of policy, not just high-speed rail, not just the taxation regime, but across the whole board. And I think that's an important starting point for any Scottish government. Again, another important thing in terms of developing our own country is within the white paper. I've got a copy here on the table. I'm sure many of you have either seen it or read parts of it or maybe read the whole thing. But another important issue there is about developing a constitution. And that's a really important part of the process that will happen after we vote yes. Because that starts to lay down the ground rules and the expectations of the nation and what we can expect, the kind of country that we can expect to live in. And I know there's other members of the panel, a couple of Leslie in particular, who's got real strong views about how we should go about constructing that constitution. And I certainly hope that when we get to yes and when we get to the stage where we have that constitutional debate, then it's about what the views of the people of Scotland are, dominate that debate. And there's been other countries across the world who have developed their constitution in different ways to lesser or no success. But involving people, say if we take a couple of thousand people across the whole of Scotland and say, you know, what is the things that, what kind of country do you want to live in, what's important to you? That's a great starting point, because you're getting a diversity of views, and if these people are picked at random almost, then you can start to really get a real system of values across the whole nation that reflects the whole nation. And again, it's something that the UK has never been able to do, is have a written constitution. And if we did put it in constitution, then we could make sure that when Scotland was going to be faced with going to war, for example, then within that constitution there'd be something in there that said, if we're going to make a decision to send our troops into a war zone, then that is something that needs to be decided in a vote in our parliament. And unlike Iraq, where a decision was not taken in our parliament, a vote was not taken in our parliament, it meant that people were sent to Iraq from this country in an aggressive fashion, and we know that the disgust that we witnessed on the streets was something to behold during that time, because it was felt that that decision was made for all the wrong reasons, and the people had no say in what that decision was. The issue as well in terms of the constitution is you can start to lay down things like the right to childcare. I mean, that's quite a big issue at the moment, and as Cllr spokesperson for children and education, childcare is pretty much up on the agenda at the moment. But you know, if you had something in your constitution that actually guaranteed that childcare could be available to your citizens, then that can be you know, your government on duty bound then to provide that level of care for our young people. And similarly, you know, in terms of the international organisations we want to be part of, then again that can be laid down as part of the constitution. The other point I wanted to talk about tonight was developing a much more democratic type of society. In the last week or two, we've all gone to, well, some of us have gone to the polls to vote for members of the European Parliament. The European Parliament has 751 MEPs representing 5 million people over the continent of Europe. And in the UK, we've got something extra special in terms of our representation, because we've got something called the House of Lords, which is 850 people who are not elected by anyone, who are paid £300 per day for just turning up. And you know, in terms of the democratic accountability, that is something that in an independent Scotland that we just would not have. We would not have people unelected representing our views every day in a parliament, and then at the same time these are the very people who are criticising the MEPs in Europe for maybe taking the wrong decisions, and it's the very people who are unelected in the House of Lords, and are thereby, the very fact of maybe given £1 million to the Labour Party, or maybe given £1 million to the Conservatives, and they get a little lordship as being their payoff. So in an independent Scotland,
we will not have, we'll have a written constitution, we'll have a House of, we will not have a House of Lords, and even if we decided to have, for example, a second chamber within our Parliament, and that's quite a possible thing, within that, we make sure that in every case, that every level of representation was actually democratically elected and not just appointed by whoever the Prime Minister might be or the government of the day might be. The third thing I wanted to sort of talk about tonight as well is on a more sustainable economy. And we really have a fantastic opportunity in Scotland because Scotland is already has a great and vibrant economy. But it's how we grow that economy and how we make it sustainable in the longer term. We all know that taxes we pay go to Westminster and they give us back the ban reform or whatever they think that we should get back. Now, I don't understand the call for having either 20% of the taxation raised in Scotland, 30%, 40%. Doesn't really matter. What we want in Scotland is 100% of the taxation that's raised here to be spent in Scotland and used to boost our economy and make sure that we can create the jobs and the kind of society that we want to be part of and live in. And Scotland has every chance of being a successful and having a vibrant economy if we become an independent nation. And you can only look south of the border to see where the focus lies. As far as the UK is concerned, the focus lies in London and the south east. You know, if it doesn't move there, then it doesn't happen. And I feel quite sorry in a way for people maybe in Manchester and Liverpool and Newcastle, because they don't have this opportunity. They don't have this opportunity to vote yes in September to try and create a better and more vibrant economy for the people. And they've just got to lump it at the moment because we know that most of the investment, most of the financial activity goes on around London and the south east. And we've got to try and change that and make sure that we can have all the levers of the economic power here in Scotland so we can make our own decisions and drive forward our own economy to create jobs. The last thing I just want to talk about now that would be remiss of me as being the councillor for the Scythe. But defence is an issue that comes up certainly on the doorsteps of me as I'm going around the Scythe. And people are concerned about jobs in the dockyard and so on as well. All I can say is that on that one, at the start of the evolution, there was 32,000 shipbuilding jobs in Scotland. Today, there's 3,200. And that's a rough sum. Somewhere along the line, we've lost 29,000 shipbuilding jobs in Scotland since devolution began. So I think there's a lesson there. That's nothing to do with independence. That's happened under the current regime. That's happened with Westminster governance of Scotland. 29,000 jobs. Now, if you look at it just across the water to Norway, they're currently employing 20,000 people in their shipyards. And if anybody's that interested in shipbuilding, I can give you a long list of ships that they have built in the last 12 to 24 months. And none of it is big, huge aircraft carriers, but there's a lot of commercial activity, and there's a lot of things like ferries and support vessels and so on. And that keeps 20,000 people, highly skilled engineers, in work across the whole of Norway. So to say that if we vote yes in September, all our shipbuilding jobs will go in Scotland is absolute bunk. You know, we've got to put a stop to this lie that come September we'll lose all these jobs. After the carriers have been built and have gone, there is absolutely nothing in the pipeline to bring any more bay funnel ships, i.e. Royal Navy, MOD ships, into the site. So that's something we need to understand as well. If you're a yes supporter, that's a message you need to get out to the people in this community, because there's no guarantees remaining in the UK, but where the guarantee does lie is we can create a focus in Scotland to try and emulate Norway in terms of the 20,000 jobs that they have created for their shipbuilding industry, and why can't we do exactly the same? Just on one final point, I know you're going to sit down. One final point just on defence. If you look at a map of Scotland, within the UK. And look as out as far as Rockall, look as far north as the Shetlands, and think about all the activity that goes on in these waters. You know, we've got oil industry, we've got gas industry, we've got renewables, we've got fishing. There is not one single Royal Navy ship, surface ship, based in Scotland to protect any of these resources. Not one. And again, people sometimes laugh at the, you hear them on TV and they'll be laughing at the prospect of a Scottish Navy. But my goodness me, shouldn't we be protecting our vital resources, our fishing, our oil, our gas, our renewables, in every way that we can by taking a navy that's suitable for our needs instead of two £6 billion carriers, one of which is never actually going to enter into service. You know, that's £3 billion that's going to sit rusting somewhere after it's been built, because it ain't going to have any planes flying off it and it ain't going anywhere. So these are the things we need to think about. Think about another map regarding the Royal Air Force, and if you imagine the whole of the UK, in Scotland at the moment, the Royal Air Force map shows that there's 4 locations, 4 bases in Scotland. And we can already strike one of these off because one of them was Lookers, and that's closed to Royal Air Force. That leaves us with 3, and that's the extent of the Royal Air Force coverage we have in Scotland. If you look at the map further south, you'll find that there's up to 60 bases south of the border. And again, you've got to think about, right from the cabinet level, if they're thinking about protecting areas across the UK, they're thinking about protecting their own area. And what we do in Scotland, and independent Scotland, is make sure that we have our forces lined up so it's appropriate for the size of nation that we have, and make sure that when we decide maybe not to go to war, but when we send our troops across to Scotland, then it's for peacekeeping purposes, and you're taking our role in the world very seriously, and not being an aggressive force as we've seen with the UK in certain other areas. I think after those speakers have spoken, I'm delighted to take questions on that. Thanks very much for your attention.